All right. So after this wonderful conversation, where we decided that cereal is now a soup, except for on to the 18th meeting. First off, announcements. Workshop this weekend, talking about some basic artificial intelligence. Jake, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so we'll be basically just going over some basic ways to program in AI, introducing randomness, making it so your AI isn't, flawless, making it so it's a planned flaws to make it act more like a player would, that kind of stuff. We'll be doing it in Unity.
Yep, so come this weekend and see how to make your AIs act a little bit human. And then if anyone has any ideas or games that they want to show off before the meeting, as usual, please come up and talk to us. That's really cool to see what everyone in the club is doing. And pay dues sooner rather than later. We're going to be ordering the t-shirts fairly soon here, so if you want to get your size, get those in. All right, so today we're going to be talking about making stories and characters in your games. And to start off, we're going to talk about how almost every game has a story. Now, does anyone have a game that doesn't have a story in mind? Snake. Yep. Snake, Solitaire, something. A lot of your very, very simplistic games don't have a story. But if you think about it, you want to go on?
Yeah. So even simple games like Angry Birds, for example, has a story. It's very simple, but it's still there. Like, for example, the birds are angry at the pigs for stealing their eggs, and they want to get revenge on them. That's the story. But then with different genres, the story can expand and be more important to the game, as in, for example, The Last of Us, where it's almost entirely story-driven.
Yep. And there's obviously a very large scale in between here where games have some story, but it's not necessarily the main point, or they are half and half. The Last of Us is an extreme end, and Angry Birds is an extreme end on the other side. So, what the story does. First off, it creates the world and the characters. It makes, it sets the scene for what your game is. And the second thing that it does, it drives your game, whether it be through conflict, which most every game will have some kind of conflict that you can find in the story, and this can be both, the main character or the world will be developed as you go on through the game. So as you go on, you will have some kind of development of your characters. Not every game has character and world development. Most games that have any story will have some kind of main conflict and will kind of set the scene with some world and character creation, though that might be limited or explained more in others.
Yeah, so basically, again, story is more visibly shown in some games more than others. Usually this is through dialogue or cutscenes, which definitely shows more about the character and the world as a whole. Otherwise, the world is really just there for the game to really be played in, and then the character is like the person that you're playing as, or other side people, I guess.
Yeah. And I think this is Final Fantasy?
Yeah, Final Fantasy VII.
So, Final Fantasy VII, they do a really good job. Is there a movie for it?
Yeah. Advent Children.
Oh, the day I learned. But they do a really good job setting the scene with their story and telling you what the setting is in that kind of game. So, creating your story and your characters. What comes first? So, before we do this, what do you guys think should come first with creating your story and characters? Where should you start with all of this? Like, what is the very, very basic thing? Yeah.
depends on the story and characters.
Yep. But I'd say that there's even some way to start before that.
Maybe just like backgrounds of characters. Like if you know where they came from, you might know where to take them.
Yeah.
I'd say it really depends on what your goal is with the game, because if you're like, if you want your game to explore some sort of specific theme, you're gonna want to have like that theme in mind as you're developing the story.
Yep.
If like you're just doing something simpler, you can like start from there. It's like, well, it's something simple. I don't really have to delve into it as much.
Yeah, so having a little bit of an idea of what you're doing before you dig into it is a good idea, definitely.
I know, at least when I've heard like Nintendo talk about Splatoon and games that in new IPs that they've made, is they take the gameplay and how they want it to feel, and then turn that into the story and the story of the world. And stuff like that.
Yeah, and there's definitely multiple ways to go about this. Story development is half an art, half a science, but what we found for what you could do if you wanted to start with this story were just a couple very basic things. Get a general idea of the world, like very, very general, as in like you have Mario World and you're gonna have, you know, castle or something, and you're gonna make it across your world to get to this castle, and a rough outline of the plot. So what's the conflict? You in Mario, you want to save the princess. That's simple. You don't know who's saving the princess, you don't know what this princess is like, you don't need to know anything more than that, because that can all change depending on what type of game you're making. But this basic, very, very basic story can apply to all kinds of different games, and you can build off of it once you know what game.
Yeah, so like for example with Mario, there's the castle, there's Mario, and then the objective in the game is to save Princess Peach, at least in most of them. And then once you have that general idea, you can expand upon it. Like in Mario, like there's pipes, there's like the Goombas, there's the mushrooms, there's all that sort of stuff that's added onto the story, which kind of builds up that world.
Yep.
And then there's more characters that can play different roles in that story, like for example Bowser being the villain.
And before you go any further than just getting these basic ideas down and some general ideas, which you can always like write down general ideas if you have them, but before you go into like writing scripts and stuff, definitely start working on other aspects of your game. Get an idea, like what type of game are you going to do? Are you going to make your game, you know, Super Mario Bros? Is it going to be something more like Smash Bros? Is it going to be Paper Mario? Because Paper Mario is a very different game from Super Mario Bros. How many people here have played Paper Mario? Yeah. What is different about the story in that game compared to your normal Super Mario Bros. And whatnot?
There's more of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
They definitely drive a lot more story in that game. They actually have like a serious plot that you're going on with.
It also just has dialogue in the first
Yeah.
place.
yeah,
There is no dialogue built into Super Mario Bros. That I'm aware of, at least
Yeah.
not most of them.
I mean, the Toad talks to you.
That's right. Toad talks to you. Princess Peach is in another castle. So,
Talks to you.
but that is the extent of the story,
yeah.
pretty much. So it's good to know what kind of game you're gunning for before you go into the story, because for a game like Super Mario Bros, you don't need to go into the story very much after this. Whereas if you're doing Paper Mario, maybe you do want to invest quite a bit and invest more resources.
Right. And this especially ties more into the differences in genres between the two. Super Mario is more of a platformer, while Paper Mario is more of a straight-up RPG, so there's obviously going to be more cutscenes, dialogue, course objectives, and again, more elements that kind of fit into an RPG, such as side quests.
Yep. So once you get your idea for what kind of game you want to do and you start making it, like you can start laying out the story, but from personal experience and also seeing hearing from other people, it seems to work a lot better to work as you go with your story. I know Braid did this with their enemy mechanics, but also to be able to see what you're capable of doing in your game and what you have resources to make, and piggyback off of that and come up with more ideas and come back is a really good way to continue building on your story. And if your game takes, let's say it takes a year, which isn't that long for some games, but let's say your game takes a year to make, you're going to come up with more ideas during that year of what you can add to your story. So you want to leave yourself some room to expand on and be able to add stuff in without having to cut stuff out at some point. And so you want to start fairly simple and be able to build up off of that as you keep going.
Yeah, so for example, Undertale. So there's the protagonist, which is Frisk, the antagonists, which I guess are the monsters, and I guess yourself, depending on the route that you're going. And then there's like the talking allies and friends, there's the side characters, and then as you're going through the story, there's like the different events that pop up, and yeah.
Yeah, and in some games, if as you're making the game, you might come up with, like, when you're thinking of antagonists, you might think, oh, we need, to have some bosses for all these different dungeons. But if you haven't made those dungeons yet, you haven't decided what those dungeons are going to be like, maybe you should, hold off on some of those and come up with it after you decide on like a theme for that dungeon. And then after you have like a water-themed dungeon, then you can kind of go into your, by the way, please don't do water-themed stuff all the time. I hate underwater levels. But once you get that idea of what you're going for with your theme in a more specific area of the game, it's a lot easier to come up with a character that fits into that part of the world. Yeah.
Sorry, I just really wanted to. One thing, you could also go the other way and think of a cool boss monster, and then try to think back and think of what kind of place this boss monster would live in, and try to build what kind of creatures would inhabit the place. And also, I'm sorry, it's just bothering me. Is that a screenshot from Undertale?
Yes.
I think that's
I don't remember
fan
that happens. I think that's fan.
I don't remember.
I haven't played the game, so
Yeah, it's when Toriel is dragging Frisk.
No.
Yeah, but that's not Toriel. That's another character. He's got the horns.
I didn't even realize that.
Stuff in the background.
no, that's why you gave it a weird look when it came up.
Pretend it's Toriel.
I have no clue what's going on, so. Aiden's just sitting there like,
Play all the fan games. Come on.
Wait, but isn't there a second Undertale game now?
You get that
There
scene
is.
when you name yourself.
It's not. This isn't.
Okay, and then it triggers.
yeah. But back to your main point, yes, like I said, working with your story is half an art, half a science. You definitely can work off of that, but I would caution you if you do it, because it's very easy to make a character that you don't have the budget or the scope won't fit into what you're doing. And if you make 10 characters, then you have to combobulate a world to make them fit together, and sometimes inconsistencies happen when you do that. But if you do it correctly, you can manage it that way.
Yeah, I was just wanting to point out an example of that actually working out. Was
Yeah.
that the characters in Deltarune, like a lot of them were inspired before the game started being developed. They were inspired by art that Toby Fox saw of someone interpreting the card suits as different characters, and that's how those characters were inspired before Toby Fox even decided to make a game.
Yeah,
That's one example of that working out in a positive way.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's a good example of that. There's definitely cases where that can happen, and oh wait. Also, events as you go. events are even more important to kind of do as you go, I'd say, because when you first come up with your game idea, you don't have, a grand scheme of all the different things. If you're doing a RPG where you have separate battles as you go, it's a lot of times a good idea to do those battles as you go, so that way you can, match it in with the pace that you're developing the game, so you don't make too many at the beginning and have to cut back because you have all 30 battles planned out for this plot line, and you make the first 10 and then you realize that you only really have time in the budget to make 5 more. It doesn't really make sense then you have to cram down those 20 plot points into 5, and it's really hard to do that. So set some general points for your plot, and then kind of develop all the details as you go and figure that out. And the more specific events, especially side quests, which we'll touch on a bit later, can kind of happen as you go on with your game. And disclaimer, by the way, all of this differs based off the game. Different games have very different ways of doing it. By this point, a game like Angry Birds, you'd already be done with your story, so obviously it doesn't really apply. And stay flexible. The reason I put that up there is because if you are so locked on to one idea of the game or multiple ideas that you want in the game, and then for some reason you realize that it's not going to work, you should finding a way to make it work sometimes happens, but sometimes there just isn't a way to fit a part of the story into your game without it clashing with other things and adding in inconsistencies that you want to avoid.
So a fun feature to stories and games is side quests or Easter eggs or side events, and these are definitely pretty, I guess, they provide a fair amount for the game. So for one thing, they give the game depth. They can maybe expand more on the world that your game is in, the characters, provide more character interactions, provide more battles, boss fights, that sort of thing, and they can easily add on to the hours of your game. So some games that are out right now, for example Xenoblade, the main story is about 20 hours long, but with the side quests that can easily get up to 80. And yeah, so the side quests definitely give the player a break. Definitely a lot of times they can help the player by providing additional weapons, gold, experience, that sort of thing. For example, in Zelda, where you have finding the pieces of hearts, or in Ocarina of Time, where you're getting the big Goron sword to, I guess, help out in your boss fights.
Or in Dark Souls, where you might run into a really hard boss, you might decide, shoot, I should get out of here. I should go, try to level up and find a better weapon elsewhere, level up my weapon by doing these other random things and find some other odd parts of the map to explore, because you don't want to beat your head against the wall forever without another path to go down, usually. To give your player an out so that they can come back to that is a good thing to have a lot of times, especially with an RPG or something. Yep. Does anyone else have anything to add to this? Any side quests, bonanzas?
Don't be Assassin's Creed Origins. You guys know about the side quest thing with that? They have microtransactions that you can buy the ability to not have to do side quests in the game, because they lock you out of main quest things until you get enough XP in side quests that you can just buy XP and just avoid playing the game. So
That's
don't
stupid.
No.
make your players, don't give your players the option to not play your game
Yeah.
and pay for it, because that's kind of a silly way to do it.
It's like
So make your side quests enjoyable so they actually want to
Yeah.
do it, instead of wanting to pay to not do it, because that's
That, that seems like a bad way about doing that.
yeah.
So you want people to play your side quests? They're supposed to be
Asking the rat for $5.
joyful.
Yeah, make sure, like with side quests, it's supposed to add some kind of break or whatnot. Saying go kill, 500 enemies usually isn't the best side quest to do, because that's not really into story necessarily though. So I think Breath of the Wild does a pretty good job of adding story into those side quests, and you build off of the lore that you've already made. You think World of Warcraft, you think of all these like every different quest you do adds to the lore of the world and kind of reinforces your reasoning for going out and exploring the world.
Yeah, and the exploration is definitely nice if you're the type of person who really likes to just see whatever's available in the game and just complete everything. Definitely just adds on to the overall enjoyment and I guess the feel of the game.
Yeah. Did you have something to add?
Yeah, I doubt anybody's heard of this. Has anybody heard of DLC Quest?
No.
Yeah, it's a pretty short, funny, like 2D game. There was one quest there that really cracked me up because it was a good commentary on some side quests. But this one character assigned you to collect 99 apples, 14 knives. He gave you like a whole list of a billion items, and it seemed like the worst thing ever. And then as you're playing the game, you find a bag with all of it in it.
Or
And you're just like, oh, okay, I'm done. It was just really funny, is it's like a lot of games do that they give you
Yeah.
a ton of things to find, and sometimes having a ton of things to find is really refreshing, because you feel really great when you find the one bag of everything.
Claptrap's big surprise in Borderlands. He starts listing off all these different things, and then he starts saying like I think he starts saying like 900,999, and then the door falls open for the reward that he was gonna surprise you with. It's like, oh well, there goes that. I guess here you go, and just lets you do it anyways. Yeah.
There's also, there's also the idea that sometimes they should, I don't know, never mind that. I don't know how to say it properly, so I don't know how to, like the idea that you should try to space out the side quests so that like a huge, like dramatic story moment is followed by some lower tension side quests before heading back into the next high tension thing.
Yeah, they're a good spacer to keep your
The kind of tension.
that tension from being like that. Unless your game is supposed to, be a thriller and have you always on edge. Obviously, then you or like Easter eggs that take you out of the game and whatnot. Even then, there's stuff like that.
Go find me 100.
All right, so we're gonna get into creating your own characters for a certain type of game. But before we do that, what do you guys, I want to ask you guys, what goes into making a character? Name? That's probably important.
Yes.
We're gonna use a different marker.
I said it before, background.
Background. And here, do you want to write this?
Sure.
Yeah.
Appearance?
Appearance? Yeah, that's definitely good to get an idea of what they're going to look like, because that's going to matter when you're making your game. Yeah.
Purpose or desire?
Purpose or desire?
Goal.
Goal, objective. You could word that so many different ways.
Style, goal,
Gold?
quest.
Butter? Yeah, Jack.
Personality.
Personality, definitely.
What if you don't have
Lack of personality.
Lack of. So me?
Theme.
A theme.
Something that
Yeah.
you can think around.
Definitely. And that can kind of depend on what different parts of your game are like too. And
Strengths and weaknesses?
Strengths and weaknesses, definitely. And knowing what they're good at and bad at can really drive a dialogue. Like if they're if they don't like doing this kind of thing, it kind of, you know, adds on to their personality and says, oh, I don't like, you know, I don't like doing art or something, so I'm gonna stick away from that kind of thing, depending on what kind of game you're making.
But what they add to the story or the gameplay themselves.
Yep. Yeah, what their role is.
If there's any significant gameplay difference with them, like all the heroes in Overwatch are different.
Yeah.
And they're all different characters.
Gameplay abilities, yeah.
Yeah. I'd say
Abilities versus
what we're shooting for in this one is more the story behind the character. So, but if sometimes that does tie in with your abilities, like the lore behind them. Like if you think about Junkrat or something, you think about like what goes into his character design is definitely has to do it.
Yeah, but if you're
things like Dojo Room where one of the characters, when you first get her in your party, she literally just attacks everything. You don't actually get a commander at all because she isn't actually setting out to listen to you. She's just there to fight.
Yeah.
And unless you tell the enemies that, hey, she's gonna try and stab you, she just starts hitting with her axe.
Yeah.
Not talking about any character in particular, of course.
Yeah, sure.
I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, I feel like gameplay and abilities could work if you had like, if you wanted to make a character that used like fire magic. Starting from fire magic would be a good starting point to then come up with everything else.
Yes.
Definitely.
I feel like it's still relevant.
Yes, having
Yeah.
the gameplay kind of tie into their personality or overall character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think in any good storyline, like a character would have an opponent.
Oh yeah, like how they tie in with other characters, relationships.
That's good. How did we forget that?
Yeah. Connections with other characters. Relatability, how they relate to the person playing the game. Yeah, that's very important. Sometimes you want characters to be unrelatable. Think, this isn't a game, well, there probably is a game about it, but think about Game of Thrones. Joffrey is supposed to be very unrelatable and you're supposed to hate his guts because of it. But at the same time, if you think about some like villains, you actually kind of want to make them relatable so that way it really adds to that story and you want to, like, you have some form of bond with it, but then there's some actions that they do that you just really clash with, or they just happen to clash with the
Yeah,
protagonist.
so basically making you want to care for the character. I don't know. Like,
Yep.
oftentimes the best villain is the sympathetic one, the one that has a backstory, has a reason to do what they're doing.
Or of course,
Thanos.
yeah.
You don't relate to Joffrey?
Or of course, build up a
Poison?
Or you can of course build up a character just to kill them because make them super relatable so that way they feel bad about it. Please don't do that. It breaks my heart every time.
Oh, I've done that.
All right, so now we're gonna get into making your own characters. So grab a, do people have scratch paper? I can go around with a notebook and something to write with.
I mean, we've got a table.
We can,
Oh,
yep. So to start, we're gonna be making a protagonist for a puzzle game. So put up some general pictures here to give you an idea of what to think about for puzzle games, but think of a protagonist for a puzzle game and give you like 6 or so minutes to work on this.
Yeah, let's just jump in. Let's 4 of us.
Because
You just want one might be
You guys can do this in groups or individually, whatever you want. All right. So, would anyone like to share what their protagonist for a puzzle game is like?
I cheated with mine because I already had the idea previously.
That's okay.
I got one.
What do you got, Ben?
Beelzebub is a demon puzzle master who must torture evil souls by modifying puzzles to make them unsolvable. So I was thinking like an AI, like you have to like outsmart the AI and like break the puzzle. I don't know how that would work, but
Or it could be a two-player game.
yeah, that could work. Beelzebub, he was originally the angel of puzzles, and he was the first angel to support Lucifer when he went against God.
Oh my!
Invested now, all right.
Despite this, Lucifer sees him as lame and his puzzles as stupid.
Senpai no like
Beelzebub originally tortures the souls to try to gain affection from Lucifer, but after many failed attempts, he starts ruining Lucifer's puzzles. He's scatterbrained, has a Napoleon complex, and wants to fit in with the cool demons. And he's shaped from taped together puzzle pieces, which Lucifer mocks him for.
Oh no!
That is awesome.
That's
Why
copyright.
was he shaped like puzzle pieces? Is there a reason for that?
No.
Or is that just how he was?
It's to infringe upon their idea.
Just how God made him as an angel, I guess.
Sam, we got a copy.
God was like,
There you go.
hey,
Copyright 0.
puzzle pieces. Fine, we wanna-
Cool. I think you touched on a lot of these ideas up here. The appearance, you definitely have that puzzle piece down. I didn't really hear a personality, but because it's a puzzle game, you probably don't really need too much of a personality for it. Although
You can infer
They wanna-
personality from what he
yeah, I guess he wants to fit in with the cool demons. Maybe it's a little bit.
He's kind
Kind of a nerd.
He's got the Napoleon complex.
Very jealous.
sadistic in a way.
Does anyone else have something that they'd like to share?
Oh, I mean, actually, something else can go because mine is. I already kind of said it aloud.
I haven't heard
I
it.
don't know.
don't think-
It was the one I was talking about before. I chose the name Anath. He is a professor of some kind, and he is in a situation. I don't know the plot around this character yet, but he is in a situation where to continue in his life in existence, he must complete puzzles, and he has an abhorrence for them. He's actually quite smart. He just never really found any interest in puzzles. And yeah, that's most of it.
Cool. So, given that
Doesn't find any
reason, but also the maybe relatability with that, where he's stuck doing these puzzles. Although I'd imagine whoever's playing a puzzle game probably likes doing puzzles.
There could also be relatability in that when he gets frustrated, the player is also very frustrated.
That's true.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Mine, like I said, is kind of cheating because I had the idea previously. But we're just gonna call him Alexandros for a placeholder name for the time being. But basically, the character would be a thief character. As you can tell, like got kind of like a Greek theme to it because what I'm thinking is having it take place in a Minotaur's maze situation.
Oh.
Your character, since he's a thief, he gets locked into the maze to be handled. But I consider the game to be more of a to be punished for being a thief. I consider the game to be more of a comedic stance, not a serious one. So the Minotaur isn't so much an evil monster, but he's more of an administrative role, like kind of reluctant, like, well, this is my job, I have to punish you, you're also really mean to me, and you're kind of a jerk, so I'm going to punish you even more for that.
And so he's got
So
quite the
your
personality.
character is a thief that has to escape that punishment. And so, like, puzzle out of the different situations to be able to escape your Minotaur's maze punishment.
That's really interesting. Is there any like backstory as why what's in the labyrinth that the thief is trying to get? Like what's driving them?
He wasn't stealing anything from the labyrinth. He was like stealing from place an important person here, and then they were put into the labyrinth to be punished for that.
Gotcha. Cool.
And so now they're trying to escape.
Now they're trying to escape. Exactly.
So, I have an actually non-joke character.
Okay.
He's a sentient puzzle piece named Puzzleman, and he is completely unique. There are no others of his kind, but all he wants to do is fit in. And the whole game is about solving puzzles where you're making things fit in, but he never gets to. So it's like a horrible, dramatic
Terrible.
game where he looks like he's meant to fit in, but he can't.
I never thought I'd be so attached to a puzzle piece character called Puzzleton.
Puzzle.
Just explained him, and we already
Doesn't
love
belong.
Oh my god. That's so deep.
Yeah, okay.
It hurts. Did you guys want to share? Or I thought I saw your hand up for a second, so. Anyone else? Jack?
Alright, so mine is a rat named Gorgonzola.
Gorgonzola.
Basically, he has to go through like these laboratory tests to obtain cheese at the very end. Now the tests are either like really simple and they eventually get to like downright animal abuse, but Gorgonzola just wants the cheese, so he can put up with it.
Very simple drive and what he wants to get. Makes sense. Cool. All right.
Does he have a candle on his head?
No, this isn't Hearthstone. This is World of Warcraft.
It's a Chowder reference.
Oh, is
In
it?
Chowder, there's a rat named Gorgonzola.
He has a candle.
Oh my.
I figured that was the reference.
We primed it with Chowder.
I thought it was
Memories
I thought it was a what are they called in
Kobold.
Kobold reference? Yeah.
Warcraft.
Because they definitely have candles. Steal my candle.
But they're not.
They're like half rat, half human.
But they're not bad.
Yeah.
D&D kobolds are lizards.
What do you got, Zach?
Character's name is Sanderson, like Anderson with an S. Because he's a Sandman, he has Sandman style abilities because he's made of sand. And the idea for like his role in the game is he has to basically redirect water that's going to like wipe out his village or whatever. But because he's made of sand, he can't touch the water, or else like either part of his body will go away or like you'll just die and have to restart. And you have to use some of your body in order to manipulate the world and redirect or like move pieces to redirect the water. Yeah, and they can take whatever shape they want.
Yeah. And you said you started that idea based off the sand theme, and you kind of built your character around that, which is a good way to go about it if you're trying to make that. Especially if you already know what the world is like or what your game's going to be like and it has to do with sand, it can really add to your character to fit it in with that. Cool. Any last people before we move on? All right, so for our next character that we're making another. We're making a major character in an RPG. So a lot broader, a lot more ways you could go with this one, but
Hopefully less confusing than the bottom right character.
Character or main? Is that
it's
character or
not the protagonist,
Not the
but a main character in the story.
one of those is the
Is it?
I thought you meant like.
Well, Sora is the main character.
yes.
But, I mean, arguably Zelda is too.
And then, for all we know, that cat guy could be the main character.
Could be. This could be third
True.
person.
But Zelda's name is in
True.
the title of an entire franchise.
Yeah, but she's not the main character.
Well, I mean,
Usually.
She has.
Sometimes she is.
She has stolen the title from the real main character every single time.
Ganon.
If you make a protagonist, I won't stop you. I won't slap you. You can make a protagonist.
Where Zelda was the main character.
Alright, so we're done.
There's also games where you switch off. Spirit Tracks, you play as Zelda,
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
but not I wouldn't say she's the
Cardboard
main.
cutout.
That's kind of, yeah, that's exactly what I was saying.
What if we,
Right.
what if we make our character?
Do with it what you want.
Has a personality.
I'm not gonna stop you either way.
We make
It's an important distinction.
What if we make this character
If you want, you could just do Sideshow Bob and not even do a main character.
emotional and has a really deep person?
This is to give you
But
direction.
he's a major character, not the main character.
He's a major.
All right.
All the items onto him.
Okay. Wait.
Write your last little sentence and we'll share some ideas here.
Where his face will change when you're not looking.
You look very ready to share your idea.
Mine is the character's name is Chime. Basically, the protagonist's friend and ally, like childhood friend. My idea, like the main goal of the game, is basically where they're from, where these characters are from. Adventuring is kind of like a rite of passage, where like, okay, like during a year, a certain moment in your life, you're gonna like, okay, go out, adventure, and then you can come back and be like a full member of society or what have you. And so what I was thinking for Chime was that I based her on like the Kenku race from Dungeons and Dragons. And so like those are like flightless birds. So I thought it would be an interesting like motivation for her to like try to find a way to be able to fly. Like that's her main thing, is she wants to fly.
Oh.
Cool.
Is that also, is she named Chime because they can only speak in repetition?
Yeah, they can only like speak in sounds. So like Chime officially is like her real name is the sound of wind chimes, but obviously we can't pronounce that. So like her like the English name is.
The translation is
Yeah, exactly. That's the translation.
cool. Yeah, and then they're going on their story at the same time as the main character, so that's kind of how you get to know them.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. All right. Anyone else have any cool ideas? Yeah, Jack.
All right, I came up with Tutor the Unskippable, which
Can't
teaches the main character how to basically play the game. He's also a father figure to the orphaned main character. And by the 2-hour mark, he's killed by the evil King Chocolate.
By the 2-hour mark.
When you would be killed.
The evil king, excuse me?
King Chocolate.
I mean, that's
King Chocolate.
Chocolate.
No.
Chocolate.
That doesn't work.
Chocolate.
I like this character. It's already got the tragic backstory.
His name is Chocolate, okay?
It's just literally chocolate.
I love how you presented it, just Tutor the Unskippable. It took me a second for it to sink in what you just said.
Very good.
Cool. Good character.
Alright, so my character, his name is Hips Oberston, and he's kind of like a goblin-like character, different race than the main character, so he ages faster than you, but he's your childhood friend. So he's aging faster, and he's kind of in his old age now, but you're just like 20 years old or something. And so you're about to go out into the world, and you want to help fulfill this man's life, or your best friend's life, or save him, I don't know yet.
So he's
Kind of go.
Does he have a family?
Yeah, from old
Does he
age.
have grandkids?
No, he's just you.
Kind of going through his bucket list while he's.
He's got no one. He spent all this time being friends with.
That's really interesting, though.
Like a life of his own.
Does he go twice as fast as you?
At the end, he dies.
Does he just age faster, or does he actually like move? Oh, okay.
There's no benefit.
That's unfortunate. That's really sad.
More mature. He's just still like an 18-year-old.
Wait, is he exactly your age? Or like, was he born the exact time, or was he just like a child at the same time? Okay.
That way, like when you were like kids. Like,
So you grew up together, but like not when you were babies.
yeah.
So he's a 5-year-old when he looks like a grown man.
Yeah.
It's like dog.
Yeah, it's just like dogs.
At the end of the game, he
So
dies, and it
childhood
ends
is just
like
1 month.
a real life picture of a dog, right?
Cool. Any other people want to share? Zach?
He's kind of a character and a story element in that he's like, I've always liked the idea of like omnipresent like ideals. So like he's kind of like, I called him the Void because like he's been around since like the beginning of time in the universe. And
Okay.
since humanity started up, he's been granting certain people powers that give them the ability to control reality. And like that's all he does. Like he just gives people powers and lets them do what they want, because to him it's more or less something to do, because like he is forever
Mhm.
and he is everything. So like
He's a omnipotent god,
Yeah.
essentially. Yeah.
but he doesn't exactly have a form
Mm-hmm.
that you can.
You're
like,
giving me a
touch. So-
lot of Brandon Sanderson vibes right now, if
Yeah,
anyone
so
knows that.
when you interact with him, he's just like a voice in your head, because your character is his next champion, basically. And I was gonna give him the ability to like go and fight him, and like take up his mantle, or like do whatever you want, destroy
Mhm.
reality. Hell yeah!
Cool. That's pretty awesome. I like how this main character isn't necessarily one that you fight, but one that just plays a serious impact in the story and has all the is the one pulling all the strings in the background, it seems like, on one side of things. But cool. Anyone else? Yeah.
Alright, so my character kind of came about as an idea of like kind of like a modern fantasy setting. So
Okay.
kind of a trickster rogue type, an over-the-top fashion sense, and like think really gaudy stuff, like go top, just shoved completely over their head. Like they're just putting the top half, no one knows how they see out of it.
I like that.
Like-
Just got that comedic side of things going.
Yeah. And like, no one is actually sure of their race either, because
They're just all covered with all this gaudy stuff.
literally nothing visible of them.
Cool.
And yeah, like, and he's either shouting or just completely silent. So volumes either have to be 100% level, or like you're not gonna hear him, and you're just gonna turn. He's just gonna be standing behind you.
What's his relationship to like the main character in the game?
He's kind of a person that you just pick up as you travel along. You just encounter him, he just starts following you.
I feel like I'd like to drop that person real quick. Just try to.
Twisted sense of humor and all that, and he would probably have no problem just kind of making things difficult. You should keep an eye on him.
That's an interesting concept, though, having a character with you that you don't necessarily want to be with you, but you get to deal with them and. Jar Jar.
I mean, this character can actually do other things.
True. They might be. Are they like super capable too?
Got extensive knowledge of like the cities and stuff, and like as I said, trickster rogues, they are actually pretty skilled in needing those kind of skill sets kind of associated with that.
That's cool.
It's just that
Just max volume all the time.
yeah, it's just that well, not all the time. As I said, it's either you can hear him across a crowded room, or you can't hear him at all.
Oh my.
And it's not sure which is scarier, when he's screaming at everyone in the room, or when you can't hear him at all, and you have no clue where he is.
That's a really cool idea. I like how you took that. Anyone else have any last things?
So, So this character is not the one I did with them, but is one I've been wanting to do for a game. Doesn't really go by a name, doesn't really care about a name, but basically he believes he's been cursed a long time ago, that every time he dies, he takes over the person who killed him. So he's lived for a ton of lifetimes and kind of just doesn't really give a shit anymore. But he's really just kind of trying to die. He's trying to undo the curse so he can just be dead and not have to deal with, living anymore. But he then finds out that he finds out that the souls of every person who's killed him has been basically being dragged around with him with no say in anything. So he finds out that maybe he is the curse itself. That
Interesting.
everybody who's killed him is trapped into this endless something. And then he realizes that he really needs to find a way to kill himself, not so he can free himself, but so he can free everyone else and stop trying to. It kind of becomes like a selfless goal, but it's kind of tough because he realizes one of the options he might have to take is if there's no one left and then he dies, maybe he'll actually die. So he's kind of like a villain and has to struggle with this. Is everyone being dead worth these people not having to suffer forever? So
It's a very conflicting.
it's something I put a lot of thought into.
I really like that idea.
The natural causes
jump off
kill
the cliff and
themselves.
stuff?
No, it just takes the next person.
Then he would reincarnate as the cliff.
I see.
Now how does it die?
Global warming.
Just hope that he doesn't reincarnate as Void and just omnipotent God. Oh shoot!
Wait, so you see him being as more of you see him being more as a villain or
Kind of like a sympathetic villain, but is really not. He doesn't have bad intentions, but
He's just a character that isn't good or bad necessarily, but there's.
and he really didn't care about dying before because who cared? But now he really cares because each death is one more person added to the pile of whatever.
Can he interact with these people at all? Or?
Do you get to kill him?
No, not really.
How does he know about them?
What?
How does he know about them if he can't interact?
He finds out about them through. I'm not going to bother explaining.
Events.
Events.
What's the entirety of the plot?
I don't know. I don't know yet. We're still
All right.
coming up with details.
All right, so let's compare what it was like making characters for the puzzle game and for the RPG. What were some? Did you guys notice differences? Was one easier than the other?
I felt a little more inclined to do backstory than anything else because you have to have a reason for all of these characters to be there.
Yep.
And explaining their presence enriches the game.
Yep. So that's kind of what I was getting at with having a little bit of a world to build off of it when you start going into the depths of the character is nice, but it's also, like Aiden said, sometimes that's how you can start with a single character and build that world from that character and get an idea of what the world is like. So, yeah, good point. Did anyone find one to be easier than the other, or were they about the same?
I thought the puzzle one was actually easier because it was a bit more constrained. In an RPG, it could be anything.
Definitely.
So,
yeah.
You gotta almost build out your world first before you can even make a character.
And I think with the puzzle one, you could kind of ignore some of these things. In a puzzle game, you don't necessarily need to have relationships with other people because you might be the only person in the game. You might not even have dialogue in a puzzle game. You might not have. Your role might just be to solve puzzles or something, but there's a lot of stuff here that just can get glanced over for a protagonist in a puzzle game that for a main character in an RPG game you need to put a lot of thought into all that kind of stuff because you get to see all sides of things in an RPG. Any other comments?
For me, it was RPG, but that's just because the only puzzle games I played don't have characters and they're just puzzles.
There you go. So the main character is one that with no appearance and insomnia and everything else to boot. There you go. Character made. Main character in Minesweeper. Cool. All right. Well, wrap things up. Come this weekend for Jake's workshop on some basic AI. If you have anything to show before a meeting, come and talk with us. And if you want t-shirts sooner rather than later. And go forth, make games, and be awesome.
Yeah. Woo. Anybody want this?